I'm Christopher Schoenwald, and welcome to Life as a show intently focused on helping people find their professional pathway by exploring and unearthing the details of jobs from around the world. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to throw this out there. I have a channel over on YouTube, Life as a ... which basically hosts highlights from these audio conversations that I have with these great guests. They typically run 10 to 15 minutes, and they're there to kind of present a different vantage point. You know, for people that aren't into audio, aren't into podcasts, but are still looking for career advice, ideas, help, all that great stuff, send them over to YouTube. Like I said, Life as a ... And if you do get over there, I would love that like or subscribe. I mean, it's the best way to let that algorithm know that the content is worth sharing and should be out there. So anyway, I do thank you for letting me plug this a little bit, but I think it's about time to get into today's episode. We all know that there are a zillion ways to make a professional mark and build a career or business. The number of possibilities these days are borderline infinite. However, what is it you do when your passion is centered less on yourself, but on a particular cause? Well, in many cases, this can lead people down the path of working within or even starting their own public charity or nonprofit. Now, if that sounds like you may be wondering what truly goes into such a life and career, what challenges exist, what helps you succeed in the nonprofit universe, and should you even do it? Well, these are some questions I'm happy to say I've got some answers for you. Not through me, of course, but this wonderful guest I've got lined up for you today. She's just the person to listen to and lean in towards, as she has been operating her own public charity for over 17 years. So without further ado, let me more formally introduce her to you, and we can do this. Denise Schamens has 3 neurodivergent children, all young adults. Due to her first-hand experiences, she served for 10 years as a family engagement liaison for CESA-1, Cooperative Educational Service Agency in Wisconsin. And her insights into the needs of children with ASD or autism spectrum disorder gave rise to Good Friend Incorporated, a public charity dedicated to creating autism awareness, teaching acceptance, and fostering empathy. And Schamens serves as its co-founder and executive director. And since the founding of Good Friend back in 2007, Denise and her team have provided autism awareness, acceptance, and empathy training to more than 67,000 kindergarten to grade 10 students in Wisconsin. And her other passion lies in her creative pursuits within and outside the organization. She is a 5-time short film editor, director, winning 5 International Film Festival awards. Plus, she also manages to find time to work as a theatrical set designer, a regular university guest lecturer, and a frequent conference presenter. Now, in 2013, Denise became a first-generation facilitator for SIB Shops, a U.S. national program dedicated to the lifelong and ever-changing concerns of millions of brothers and sisters of people with special developmental, health, and mental health needs. And Denise has led that team for the last 10 years in offering Good Friend Incorporated SIB Shops. Now, most recently, Denise has developed and produced a new neurodiversity at work training program, online training modules, and yet another award-winning documentary. So with all of this noted, I'd like to welcome you to my conversation with Denise Schamens. Yeah, so welcome to the program. How are you doing today, Denise?
I'm great.
Yeah, really excited to have you on here. I've got to say right off the top, I really enjoyed, researching for this episode, and I'm thrilled to be able to share a little bit more about, what you're involved in, and of course, to learn more, certainly. So yeah, like I said, really excited for this.
I'm excited too. It's a big story there, so lots to talk about.
Yeah, excellent. Well, speaking of which, I do have this first segment lined up, and it's something called Coloring Wikipedia. And as my listeners know, it's a segment where I just read off a definition of something that relates to the guest. Now, unfortunately, Wikipedia didn't have a very good definition of the term that I was looking to cover, neurodiversity. So I did have to do some internet sleuthing, and I found one at Harvard Health Online. So let me just read off its definition for neurodiversity, and then afterwards you can comment. Sound okay?
Yes.
Okay, so here we go. Neurodiversity. Neurodiversity describes the idea that people experience and interact with the world around them in many different ways. There is no one right way of thinking, learning, and behaving, and differences are not viewed as deficits. The word neurodiversity refers to the diversity of all people, but is often used in the context of autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, as well as other neurological or developmental conditions such as ADHD or learning disabilities. There we go. Admittedly, it's a fairly broad look at this concept here, but based off of your experiences, based off of your thoughts, first take, what do you think of this?
I mean, well, to give you some backstory, neurodiversity was coined by Judy Singer. She's an Australian sociologist, and she started using it weirdly enough in 1998, which is when my son was born with autism. But I wasn't using it. Our organization wasn't using neurodiversity until probably 3 or 4 years ago. So in the space that we are in as an organization, and we'll talk about that, was always very autism specific. We did talk about non-apparent conditions, invisible disabilities, as you will, but neurodiversity has only been used in our organization just very briefly, and that has been the direction that we're taking now. So it's kind of an interesting, as we go into the history, you'll see how that has worked. But yeah, we haven't been using that term for very long at all.
Huh, that is really interesting. And, I do have some follow-up questions there, but perhaps in the course of this conversation, they're all going to be answered. So maybe I'll hold off on those just for a moment. But in speaking of your organization, this might be an opportune time to learn a little bit more about, Good Friends Incorporated. Certainly off the top, I did
Yeah.
mention it, but maybe you could share a little bit more.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can go into our history. I'll just start it out with we founded our organization in 2007. Myself and my co founding partner, Chelsea Booty, joined forces. We were both mothers of autistic children at the time, and we were both doing very similar initiatives in our son and daughter's classroom to help their peers understand our kids' autism. And I just felt like, we'll go into my history too in a little bit, but I felt like the need was there specifically in the elementary age group to really want some answers. They didn't care if my son Sam had 5 heads, they just wanted an explanation. And so when we started, it was really educating, and has always been educating peers. So what makes us unique as an organization is we're changing hearts and minds. We're creating a community by educating that community. So none of our services we don't directly service anyone with autism or neurodivergent. So we are, really just trying to go in there, create this community, and then let them take it from there. So that's kind of how it was founded. We created a film. We thought that was the best way to reach this audience at the time, and then a curriculum that surrounded that film. So it was a 20-minute short documentary style. And then the rest of the hour-long, say, time that we would have with students K-8 would be empathy building exercises. So our tagline is awareness, acceptance, empathy. And that's always been our lane. We've always been in the autism lane since inception. And our organization has grown as our kids have grown too. So we've created more films, more curriculum. My son now is 25, and so he's pretty much the basis of where Good Friend came from.
Yeah, I love that. Again, that's referencing some of the research on you and your organization and just the evolution of it all. And I know I have some
Yeah.
questions lined up and I want to dig into that a little bit later on. But I might add as well, these films that you've referenced a couple times, these are award-winning, short films and documentaries that have garnered a lot of, not only views, but respect and, certainly a lot of admiration as well that's coming your way based off of all of this, in being able to spread, like you said, awareness for a lot of these issues.
Yeah. It's been a great platform. I mean, film is just such a great connector. People can relate if they're seeing other people that are living this way. And I think documentary style is really the best style because it's hard to question. It's hard to not believe someone who's living it, right? And sharing their experiences. So that's always been the style of our films.
Yeah, most definitely. There's a certain connection, I think, as well, like a
Yeah.
personable nature related to that type of,
Yes.
genre as well. And it would seem to fit perfectly if done well, which certainly in your case has been done well, to say the least.
Yeah, thank you. It's definitely been an issue. We've had to really make sure that we were respectfully highlighting and filming those with autism. So we started with our own kids. It was like early on, they were second, third graders. Little did they know what kind of a movement they created by us forcing them to be in these films with their teachers and their peers.
Yeah.
But it's the best way to do it. And of course, we didn't make another film or another set of curriculum until we were living it. So that's why it's grown with our children.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would like to step into another segment here, a day in the life. And I think it'd be interesting to learn a little bit more about your organization. But in terms of, again, referencing the fact that it started in 2007 and, your kids were quite young at that age. And now, like you just
Yeah.
mentioned, 25 years old. Certainly the day in the life when it first started would have been completely different than probably what it is right now. Maybe you could kind of compare and contrast that for us a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So when it started, I mean, I am a passionate mother. I wanted a good life for my son, and I didn't have any map about it, right? I didn't have anyone else that was diagnosed in our family with autism. I didn't even know about autism until he was diagnosed at just over 3. And so that was my life. I dove into that. My husband dove into that. I have 2 other kids that bookend my son, Sam. I have a 27-year-old son, Jacob, and a 21-year-old daughter, Anna. And it was also very important for me to be able to help them navigate this world. Like I said, we didn't have anyone actually with any disability within our family. So this was new territory. Back in 19, well, actually, it would have been 2001 when he was diagnosed. When I looked up online, about autism, it was pretty dismal. There weren't a lot of options. It wasn't a very positive place to be. That was like, get your kid in some therapy and maybe he'll, be independent at some point. I mean, it was terrible as a parent to see what was and how much it's changed since then, actually, the language, the opportunity, now social media, and all the platforms that neurodivergent people have now, I think is amazing. I love to see that, to compare and contrast how it was when my son was newly diagnosed. So it really was out of a passion for his acceptance that I needed to make sure that the community that I was putting him in understood him. And there wasn't anyone else out there doing it. We were part of a school district that had 17 elementary schools at the time and 1 guidance counselor. So they weren't talking about differences, right? They were just getting by, teaching to core standards. There was nothing like that. When I decided to try to do something about it and I joined forces with Chelsea Booty, it was like, what can we do? We know film is a great way to interact with them. So my life then was creating that first product, diving in, figuring out who our video team was, what our learning objectives were, what we needed to accomplish. So it was really all obsessive in this product, right? To get it out so we could immediately get it into the school. So it was producing that film. And the lovely thing about it was all these doors started opening. We got funding. We were able to pull together a board. At the same time, we were building a nonprofit as we were making this first curriculum and had no experience in nonprofit, nothing. I mean, we literally built the plane as we flew it. And yeah, so it was like all of that. You're doing all the things. It's 2 co-founders and a bookkeeper. And so we're literally just doing everything we could, get into the schools. Now we're presenting in person, just trying to make an impact classroom by classroom by classroom. We were just working our tails off, just trying to make sure that as many people could hear our mission as possible. Now we are 17 years in, and we've evolved into an organization now that I think is finally respected. I remember when we first got started, there were a lot of people that said, we'll see if you're around in 5 years. Like most nonprofits don't make it past year 5. And so we'll see. And so it was a lot of, I guess imposter syndrome kind of stuff, like, oh, we need to prove ourselves. We need to, we're just 2 moms. We don't have all the letters behind our name kind of thing. But we just had a passion. We just knew what we wanted to do and change it. And we just kept going. So it's just so weird that 17 years later, we're still doing the same thing. We're just in a bigger space now, moving into employment. So
Yeah, it's quite the journey. I mean, a couple of things that stand out there. I mean, one is that initial challenge, like you said, not having that experience and not really knowing the lay of the land, essentially, and what avenues to pursue and what not to do. But then also too, I guess
Right.
the opportunity in it as well, in the same breath that there really wasn't anything existing out there or anything worthwhile. So the
Right.
opportunity was there, and then this notion of passion, obviously, like this being an issue that is a very personal one to you. So the drive
Yeah.
to really advance this cause was definitely there, and I'm sure it fueled you through a lot of different times that probably
Yeah.
were filled with some challenge and difficulty and stress and everything else. But coming out the other side and where
Yeah.
you're at right now speaks to a lot of those points, I would say.
Yeah. And when you're doing something that you're passionate about, it comes so much easier. Like I went to school for fine art and commercial art. I was, happy to be behind the scenes making beautiful things, right? And I was not a public speaker and I never thought of myself as a public speaker. And now I presented to over 67,000 students, adults as well, conference circuit. When you are so passionate about a mission as this is, it's just so much easier
Yeah.
to do and speak to.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, one of the things that stands out in terms of that, and what you were just sharing there is like when you don't know things and, you understand you're going to make mistakes along the way, they
Yeah.
sting,
Yeah.
obviously. I mean, it's life. When you do make a mistake, it's
Yes.
natural. But I think it
Yeah.
just helps like having that passion to kind of like dust yourself off and get back up and keep going because the cause is there. There's something that's driving you. It helps you to kind of
Yeah.
like move on, forget it. Okay, well, I've got a bigger thing that I've got to, go after here. Whatever just
Yeah.
happened there. Okay, I can just leave that in the past. On to the
Right.
next, on to the
Right.
next. And I think that's where
Right.
passion really, like helps in that sense. That's the impression
Well,
that I
and you
get.
can't, yeah, and you cannot deny once we've gone in and done an assembly or a workshop, and now 2 days later you hear from the parents that suddenly their child has play dates. I mean,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff is like what makes you get up,
Yeah.
and keep doing what you're doing because you're
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
one student at a time. The same when we were in middle school, we had a young man, we do a drawing exercise as part of our, learning empathy building exercise. And this young man gave me the drawing and he wrote on it, "Thank you for helping me understand myself."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
totally had a diagnosis at 14, didn't know what that meant to him. And, you know, it changed his perspective of himself to be more strength based.
Yeah.
And I think maybe hopefully someday or after that he became his own advocate. That's what I'm hopeful for. But
Yeah.
that's the kind of stuff that keeps you going.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're
Yeah.
changing lives and, whether it's one life or whether it's, 10, 20, 100. I mean, one life unto
Yeah.
itself is pretty special thing to be involved in, when you're affecting it in a
Absolutely.
positive way. So yeah, most definitely. I'm sure that's
Yeah.
been a lot of the fuel for this passion to keep it moving forward and to keep growing it and whatnot. And speaking of which, I
Yes.
mean, again, I referenced this earlier and you also lightly spoke about this fact that the organization has changed based off of your own children as well, and their
Mhm.
ages as they've developed. And now your organization has begun to offer different types of services that have kind of grown in alignment with where your children are at. Well, not children, like young adult, are
Yeah.
at in
Right.
life.
Young adults now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Maybe you could speak to that
Yeah.
point as well and just throw that in a little bit.
Again, that was just being relevant and true and understanding our product, right? So it's like we had a lot of people when we first started, we were in the elementary space. And we had a lot of people asking, what about middle school? It's brutal. Like what,
Yeah.
what is for them? And we weren't living it yet. And we honestly actually put people off for a couple of years until my son was the oldest of our three. And by the time he reached sixth grade, then we started the process of learning about that whole culture, learning about that space. And we did a lot of visitation to middle schools. And there was one in particular, a school that we sat in. I think it was a seventh grade classroom, and it was a male teacher and the kids were crazy, talking, throwing things, not listening. He's like, "Come on, you guys, let's settle down." Nobody was listening to him. And then one of the girls stood up and said, "Shut up." Crickets after that. And so we're like, okay, they police themselves. And so we realized that our middle school film shouldn't have any adult voices in it. We were very diligent about making sure we were representing that population at the time. And what was important to them in middle school, they just want to blend. They don't really want to stand out. And so it was just such a different culture, different way of existing in middle school. And I think that's why it was perceived as being so difficult because They were just trying to figure themselves out, right? So many of those kids are changing, their bodies are changing, everything's changing. And now you throw a different way of thinking in there, and it's suddenly a nightmare. So the way that our programs for middle school progressed was to be more social justice kind of in theme for middle school, and helping them understand that, these aren't chosen behaviors. This isn't a chosen lifestyle. To really understand what it means to be different and accept each other for those differences. And then also to talk about disability harassment and bring it up and talk about how, bullying somebody based on their disability is against 3 federal laws. And so our middle school curriculum is very different in focus. And so as we were in that space, now we were like, okay, what about high school? But high school, we kind of jumped over because high school is a different animal altogether, too. Like those students are just trying to figure out themselves and their own future. Are they going to be an entrepreneur? Are they going to go to trade school? Are they going to go to a college, right? Or are they just going to work? Like what's the plan for them? And for us to go into a high school and talk about being a good friend to each other is probably going to fall on deaf ears. So we kind of skipped high school. And then, we could go into a science class and talk about brain wiring and differences that way at the high school level. Same with colleges and universities. But to do this kind of good friend sort of understanding and acceptance training was kind of lost in that place. But now our kids are 25, 24, 23, trying to be employed, trying to figure out post-secondary education. And then we find out that, 80% of that population is sitting at home or underemployed, right? So we need to change that. So our organization always had seen a need and what that phase of life, what the concerns are, what the roadblocks are to inclusion, that kind of thing. And so then now our employment training is really just talking about neurodiverse thinking and how that's now a strength, right? And how you want that on your team. So that's kind of how Good Friend has evolved over the years. But it's always been, we don't want to do it until we're experiencing it. So now we've pretty much experienced the full lifespan, and we're representing that. So
Yeah, I think that point is really, really interesting. Like what you just mentioned, you didn't want to dive into anything that you didn't know exactly or you hadn't experienced
yeah,
necessarily.
yeah,
And yeah, and then going from there. And I'm sure obviously again, that's where we were speaking about earlier, that the passion comes from. You step
yes,
into this next stage, you've got several questions, I'm sure. You're seeing issues, you're recognizing them a little bit differently, and ultimately can fuel you to start advancing that cause further and digging in. Yeah, yeah.
right. And it's a natural progression when you start looking at it that way.
Right,
It's
right.
not it's not forced. I'm not trying to, you know, put upon someone a different way of thinking. I think maybe it gets easier to recognize differences as you get older. I don't know whether that's good or bad, but yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I do have
Yeah.
another segment that we could step into, a Q&A discovery, and I would like to return to something we spoke about, early in the conversation, this notion of the film aspect to it all. And I
Yeah.
understand that you have a background in that. Like this was something that was a passion for you outside of, what you've been involved in with Good Friends. And I'm guessing at least that was part of the reason as well to, approaching this issue from that perspective, from that medium. But maybe you could share a little bit
Yeah.
more about, the film and how that's connected up to what you've done, and also some of the impact that it's caused as well. What's come about from that.
I went to school, like I said, for fine art and commercial art. So I was kind of in a lot of different mediums to do that. And then when I graduated, I was working for an architect and doing just site plan drawings and things like that. And then I ended up having my 2 boys like 18 months apart. So I stayed home. But I've always been one of those creatives that's looked for as many different opportunities or mediums that I could experiment with. And so when I was going to school, video was not something that I was interested per se. I liked photography, but as I started kind of nuancing like what my strengths were storytelling through my art. So I did a lot of portraiture, I did a lot of, a lot of people kind of representation. I wasn't a landscape kind of artist. And to me, there was always a story behind that human. And so I felt like it was a natural thing for me to jump into videography. I didn't have a lot of skill set there before our first film. I was lucky enough to align myself with really great videographers that actually worked alongside me and let me produce, direct, do everything that I needed to do to make sure, as well as sit next to them in the editing process, which I now know is kind of unusual for editors to let you do that. But before I entered into any kind of a relationship with my videographers, I wanted them to understand that my full involvement was part of it. It wasn't, me giving them an assignment and then carrying it out. I needed to be a part of every step of that. So any of the interviews that I did to set up our characters or our film talent was all me. Chelsea and I wrote the scripts for the elementary, and well, the middle school took on a life of its own. But elementary, we actually had learning objectives and we had narration that we scripted. But the beautiful thing is just having this relationship with other creatives and then working together to have this final product that tells a story that connects people. With our neurodiversity at work film, that is the employment film, and it's 10 successfully employed neurodivergent individuals in various industry. And when I put the ask out, I put it out on LinkedIn, and that's where I found them. They came forward on their own. They didn't come because their boss asked them to come. They knew they had a really great story, and they did. Like, I could do a separate documentary on each one of them. And it's so impactful to sit with someone. Everybody has a story, right? And to sit with someone and have them be comfortable enough, as well as in their neurodivergence, be comfortable enough to share with me some of these stories that molded who they are today is just priceless. Like, the process is just so rewarding. I do it again and again because I love it. But being able to showcase them and have people connect with them like I connected with them is how I use film. And the same with middle school, the same with elementary. It was very important. Once you meet these people, you can't help but just highlight who they are. It takes its own life, takes on a whole life of its own.
Yeah, for sure. And as I said earlier, I mean, these films were awarded, internationally
Yeah.
speaking, and the impact that that's had. Like, I can guess, I can imagine, but maybe you could speak to that
Yeah.
point a little bit too. I mean, that never hurts, right?
I mean, I'm sure there's stories I don't even know about, right? Because
Yeah.
that's the thing. When you put something out there, you hope that it has a life and it is making an impact and it is changing lives. But I've heard from a lot of different people, as well as like early educators, they were in general education, saw our film, took place. We probably did a staff and service for them or some kind of a training. And now they're very specific in special ed, like they're going into special ed. And then there's those that we've touched that don't really understand their own neurology. And after seeing our films, they see it, they see the things that they need to see, but yet it's in a positive light and it's a strength-based language. So now it's giving them, much more than a deficit language, which is what you need to get a diagnosis, right? So
Yeah.
it's being of that mindset of these are actually strengths once you overlook the things that could be barriers to success. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure we've heard from many, but probably there's so many more out there that we just don't know. And that's what I love about it. Let's put it out there. Let's, see what sticks. Let's help people get through
Yeah.
what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Create conversations, right? Again, returning to your
Yeah.
organization, awareness, acceptance, all those things, right? 100%. Where could somebody find these films, if they were interested?
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, well, we've always used them as our training, right? So they've always been a proprietorship kind of thing where we just didn't put it out there for the masses. Like, now people can find it, but they have to sign up for the courses and get the training that goes along with it. All of our courses are on our website, but the film is first, and then there's a course that supports it. So anyone can access it that way. But rather than just put the film out there for general consumption, we just felt like it's such a great training tool that we wanted to keep it that way. So we've been asked many times
Yeah, I'm
about
sure.
that.
I'm sure. Well, I'll
Yeah.
definitely have links, in the show notes, for this episode if people are interested.
Yeah. And we have all our trailers are on YouTube. I mean, obviously that's not the full length, but it
Yeah,
it gives you an idea. And we have a great music video out there that we did. It's called We All Fit by the Figureheads.
nice.
And so that's has all of our cast from our elementary film. So that's out there. And I don't know, I think we're at 67,000 views or something like
There you
that.
go. There you
So
go. Excellent.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got this other question here. In terms of the awareness levels as a society, again, I'm guessing here, as an outsider back in 2007 versus where we're at now, things have
Yeah.
changed, and I'm hoping at least that awareness levels have changed. But I'm certainly no expert in this space. Maybe you could speak to that point. Like, how are neurodivergent issues being viewed, would you say, within society as a whole, within schools, within workplaces? What would you say to that?
I mean, I think we're in a much better place. We have come a long way. I think that when we first started, awareness was the big thing, right? So there was Autism Awareness Month, which is the month of April. Autism Awareness or World Autism Awareness Day is April 2nd. But in the last, I want to say probably 7 years, it's changed to Autism Acceptance Month, which I love. So now most of us should be aware of the term autism. We may not know someone, we may not understand what autism all entails, but we've heard it before, right? What I love now about social media is TikTok and Instagram. Neurodivergent autistic creatives are all over the place and they're all talking. And I absolutely love that because, like I said, when my son was diagnosed, there was nothing. I would go to a conference, a statewide autism conference, so that I could see adults with autism, so I could see what that looks like, right? So I could compare. I have this 8-year old, I don't know what his future looks like. But now we have it all over the place, all over the internet. There's influencers everywhere that are now speaking of their differences. And I just think we're in such a good place with that. They all have a voice now, and there weren't very many people speaking up. We had some influencers back in the day like Temple Grandin, Stephen Shore. We had a few that were well into their 40s and 50s talking about their autism, but that was it. That's all that community had. And now it's everywhere. So I love it. I think we're right now in the middle. We're in acceptance. The more acceptance, the more we talk about it, the more we normalize it, the more we speak positively of it, then we're going to get into empathy, right? Then now people can understand it because they're hearing it.
There it is. Yeah. And it's a perspective that I hadn't really considered or thought about all that deeply. Like this notion of social media being this platform to really help advance that cause and spread awareness. Because, certainly social media gets slammed for a lot and for good reason.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
nice. It's refreshing to hear that, okay, well, there is some value to it too. Like in this sense, obviously there's a lot of value in helping
Yes.
advance this, communication medium for
Exactly.
people to interact and to learn. And yeah.
Yeah. And the more we talk about it, the more it does seem more normal,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
I mean, we shouldn't be quiet about it. We shouldn't. We
Right.
want to know how everyone's different and how they experience the world. And it's all perspective taking. And how do you learn that unless you hear from those that are living it?
Without a
So,
doubt. Yeah.
yeah.
This other question
Yeah.
here as well, and this one might be a bit of a personal one, so you can feel free to share as much or as little as you'd like. But returning
Mhm.
to you and your organization, I'm guessing here, again, we've spoken to this point of it being so personal to you, obviously.
Mhm.
So I'm guessing here that at different points, like so much of you goes into it emotionally, cognitively,
Yeah.
physically, and like the
Yeah.
highs must be incredibly high when things are going well, but the lows
Yes.
could be devastatingly low at different
Yeah.
points. So as a professional, as a mother, as a human being, like how do you manage those aspects, or how have you managed those aspects of being so tightly intertwined with a cause, throughout the
Right.
years?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, I wake up thinking about Good Friend Inc. and I go to bed thinking about Good Friend Inc.
Yeah.
But it is, like you said, it's so intertwined in my family that I can live my life and support my kids and now my young adults and my husband. and it's all interwoven there. So I can't necessarily turn it off. I mean, I have to be very purposeful about taking time off, about scheduling time with my family, because it is very consuming, right? You can be like 80 hours in and you're still like hot on trying to get something done. Like when I was producing our neurodiversity at work film, that took a year and a half out of my life. And I remember I emailed my family and I said, this project is the largest project I've ever done. And I just want you to know that I'm going to be focused in it. And if you don't hear from me, it's not because I don't care or whatever. I just want you to know it's a short amount of time that I need to be fully focused here. And my family's been extremely supportive of that. My husband's family, they've been really great. And now my kids are, starting to have their own independence. So that's good timing too. But yeah, I mean, when you, from a small nonprofit who's constantly living from penny to penny, it's it's a difficult journey to say the least. It's not a moneymaker. It's definitely I'm not getting paid what I should at market value, but that's not why I do it. And luckily I have a husband that helps support our family and let me do this, which is amazing. So it's been, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit crazy, but I think that that's what an entrepreneur has to be. You're passionate about it and you do what you have to do. We've always been able to pay the bills. We've always been able to pay our staff. We've never gotten in a situation like that, which is good, but it's a lot of balls to juggle. And especially where we are now, we're many of us are doing multiple things at once, and trying to grow and launch a product is taxing. But you have to be very purposeful about taking time for yourself.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, like being so deeply invested in something, not a terrible
Yeah.
thing. Obviously, that can be a driver of success, can be a driver of a lot of things that lead to positive outcomes. But when it goes unchecked, that's when, things can lead to some troubles or challenges or stress or whatever else, some of these things that we
Yeah.
don't want. Has it gotten easier for you, throughout the years of kind of checking
Ooh, that's
yourself,
a
or
loaded,
is it
yeah, that's a
always just a bit
loaded
of a battle?
question.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Uh, I mean, I'm in my 50s, and so I've gotten to the point now where I surround myself with people that are, I'm very particular about that, like making sure that they fill my cup and I fill theirs, and I'm
Hmm.
not wasting time with relationships that aren't, beneficial on both sides. And I mean, I I think I want to say it's gotten easier, even though it's gotten harder.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know what that means, is that it's gotten more challenging because we've had staff changes. We've had my co-founding partner retired, and so I don't have her with me. And so but it's constantly thinking about the evolution of this organization. And there's so many people that are wanting to be part of it and are reaching out to me. So in that respect, I guess I've gotten better at knowing what we need as an organization, and then trying to find the right people and connect, because I'm a huge connector. I love networking. I love connecting with people, and I've gotten better at that. And so I don't know. I guess I didn't really answer it. It's kind of gotten easier, but in probably just from maybe years of experience. I don't know.
One of the questions here, I guess what I'm driving at is like you yourself, like you've gotten better at checking yourself and like, okay, I do need to take a break here. Like I'm
Yes.
charged up about this issue or I need to get this done, but hold on a second here. I've been going, like you said, 80 hours here. It's time for a break. Has that gotten
Yes.
easier? Like
Yes.
managing yourself in that sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that has
Okay.
gotten easier. I know when to take breaks, and,
Yeah.
and when I need to check myself
Yeah.
and walk away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
for
Nice.
sure.
All right. Well, I
Yeah.
do have one last question in this segment here. And this one is returning to the wins of all of this. I mean, what would you say has been the biggest win for you? And I'm sure this is directly tied into, a personal sort of, feeling,
Yeah.
but I'd love to hear all the same.
The wins for me is I have a son who is autistic, who is now a lovely young man and is employed and has a day program, has friends, probably has a girlfriend. I mean, we're on that verge. And I find my greatest joy and his life in being able to create environments, put him in places where the people have had our training, they understand, they get it, they support him. That's probably the biggest win for me, but also just the length that Good Friend has been able to withstand, right? Like 17 years is pretty amazing, and it went really fast. And 67,000 people, like you can't beat that. So I don't know. That's enough for me. I mean, I could quit tomorrow and be perfectly happy with what we've done and the impact that we've had, but I'm not done yet. So
Yeah.
more wins to be had, but I think it's just seeing my son flourish and knowing that I can help with that. I can help create environments that are accepting of him.
Yeah, yeah. As I said earlier, I think, what struck me about all of this and thinking about the impact is if you're just
Yeah.
affecting one person's life in a positive way, with what you're doing, that's rewarding unto itself. But then when you amplify it out, and you're reaching 67,000 people, like it's almost
Yeah.
unfathomable, like
Right.
yeah, yeah. So,
And because we're 17 years, like there are kids that, had seen our films in elementary school that are now college, and we'll do a college presentation or a
mhm,
talk and they'll come up to us and like, I saw your film. I was in third grade and it made a huge impact. And now I'm an educator and, stuff like that.
yeah,
It's just,
yeah. How do you
yeah,
put that into words?
right.
I
Yeah.
do have another segment here, a water cooler story segment, Denise, and I'd love for you to share a story relating to to your work and what you've been involved in.
Yeah. So I guess the best one is the most recent one. When I was preparing to do the Neurodiversity at Work documentary, and as I said, we had those 10 successfully employed neurodivergent individuals, I would meet with each of them and we would hit a coffee shop or whatever. And two of them, Marita and Becky, are both in our film, both females that had been late diagnosed autistic. I think they were both in their 30s at that point and misdiagnosed their whole life. Some of them diagnosed with bipolar, PTSD, ADHD, anxiety, depression, like the gamut, right? Finally ended up going and getting an autism diagnosis just before we met. So they're looking at their life through this lens of autism now and having a lot of feelings about it. And, some of them aren't so great. And some of them are a lot of anger about how this was missed and whatnot. But both of them, after I met with them, were very moved and very, especially after seeing the finished product of the film, they understood how valuable their place was, their existence is, by telling their story that they had never told before and having it shown in the light that we show it in the film. And I guess that's like my biggest and my most emotional story at this point, just because it's the newest. But knowing that these ladies were just misunderstood, not listened to, misdirected their whole life. And now, because they told one person, their story is changing people's lives and possibly other females. And it was really moving for them to have that platform. And so I think I'm just happy to have been given it to them and had met them. And yeah, so it's stories like that that just kind of
Oh yeah,
blow me away.
yeah. They must. They
I'm like,
must.
I'm just making a film, right? I'm just trying to help
Yeah,
people understand, but in the process, you're actually helping those you're filming too
yeah,
by
yeah.
doing it.
Yeah,
So,
well, it's this theme throughout this conversation, I think, of like empowerment and changing lives, right? And
yeah,
changing people's directions
yeah,
in life. So, I mean, to be associated or
yeah,
attached to that in any way, shape, or form, it must be, an amazing sort of, experience and also, feeling as well along the way. Well, certainly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thanks for
yeah,
sharing that. We are rounding the bend into this last segment, a crystal ball segment. As the name implies, we're looking to the future, trends, predictions, so on and so forth. And typically within this segment, we're looking at technology and its impact on people's lives and professions. And I'd be curious about, the work that you're involved in. Is technology playing a role in any way, shape, or form, or do you see opportunities there that how things are evolving? I'd love to get your insight on that.
yes. Yeah, we ran into a technology kind of situation when COVID happened. Because we were in the schools, we were face to face and everything was in person when that when everything got shut down, we were not in the schools anymore. And we as an organization had to kind of look at ourselves and the space that we held and tried to figure out our relevancy. And number one, the first thing we did was we changed our logo. So the logo that you see behind me came out of COVID. We started our organization, or for the first, 15, 14 years, we were two puzzle pieces that connected. And we used that. We would explain that. Like, some people don't like the puzzle pieces. We're like, oh, it's because we educate you. You fit better together. Our elementary film is called We All Fit. It's based on a puzzle. It's based on people fitting together. We all are part of a larger thing. And when that happened, so we rebranded ourselves. We took out the puzzle pieces because we're listening. We are now allies of the neurodivergent population. So we need to hear them and we need to act on it. And we were hearing that puzzle pieces are negative. We're not a puzzle. We're not something that needs to be changed or fixed. And we heard that and we're like, okay, we're going to change that. So we changed our logo, and then we changed our way of presenting. We offered our Good Friend Academy, and we delved into the world of online learning, and started with LearnDash and put our film and our curriculum on LearnDash. And so we started offering it that way, thinking the teachers could now take everything that we do and present it to their classroom however they would want to. And that would be nationwide. So that's how we moved with technology to an e-learning platform. And then when we were looking at neurodiversity at work, it was going to be all e-learning. So now we're giving employers an opportunity to sign on to our platform, which is now Learn Worlds, that we're using, and create and use our training that way. And through that time, I started looking at our education, our school and community services, and wondering, are we still relevant? Like, is it still okay for us to go into school, sit down, show them a 20-minute film, and then do these empathy exercises, right? It's an hour-long presentation. Are these kids even able to sit that long? And to be honest, there were a few schools that we went into where it was difficult for kids to sit through 20 minutes. So I kept thinking, what are we doing here? Are we now so archaic in our delivery that we shouldn't continue this way? But I just keep hearing the content's amazing. So what we're doing now is we're going to start switching up our content. Rather than it be a 20-minute, we did create it in chapters. So we're going to break it down by chapter. So we're looking at other opportunities to present using technology. Most schools that we are going to have smart boards now, so that interactive element is always there. The same with neurodiversity at work. We can do webinars, we can do hybrid teaching, we can do in-person training. I've been looking at all the different industries. So we've got like manufacturing, we have financial institutions, we have education. How does that look for them? How do they want to create and take our training? So yeah, we're constantly using technology to try to figure out our best space and know what's most relevant for them to be training people or take in that information. So yeah, we're constantly training. I'm not afraid of technology. I love it. If I could use it, I would create a game or an app or something, with given time. But technology has always been very important. And I think that's why we started with film, because we could just go and talk to kids, but we do that. We also do exercises, but we also use technology. So it's always been a big part of what we do.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And one of the things I took away from that and listening to you just explain everything is, I think with technology and with any cause, I think, especially say for a nonprofit or just like for a profit business, technology used as this tool, it's helpful, obviously, in a lot of respects. Once you know your target audience or your target market, whatever it might be, you want to like amplify, you want to, get things across in the best possible way. But also too, I'm finding that it's becoming an absolute necessity. It's something that you constantly have to be aware of. Like you just said, like now using smart boards in classrooms. Okay, well, how do we, leverage that tool to put our content into that? So it's going to be effective. It's going to be impactful. 5 years down the line, maybe that technology or that tool is going to be out of date. There's going to be something different. So it speaks to this point of like being involved in any type of service delivery. You really have to keep up, keep aware. Obviously AI right now is one that's on a lot of people's minds. And I'm sure, that's something that, even yourself is probably
Yes.
considering, like, how do we leverage this? What do we do with this? And like, this is
Oh,
part
yeah.
of, running an organization. And yeah.
Yeah, and you need to be aware of the tools that are working. I mean, we're a
Yeah.
small organization, and like I said, we're doing multiple things.
Yeah.
And so without a huge staff to, have all those areas covered, we have to figure out how to be the most efficient with the time that we have. And so we're using monday.com as our project platform. We're using a lot of different things. I used ChatGPT the other day because I'm putting together promo kits to try to get this out there and tell people about our training. But I could spend a lot of hours trying to put all this together when I have the verbiage already. I have the explanation, I have the learning objectives, I have everything. So when I put all that in ChatGPT and ask them to put together a 1 to 2 page summary, it does it in 5 minutes, which would take me weeks. So yeah, there's good and bad, obviously, but I think for us as a nonprofit to use what's available is really good. I mean, I wouldn't obviously try to create new content that way, but to know that it's pulling from content that we already have out there and then creating it faster and better than I could. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the way that things almost have to
Yeah.
be done, the way things are evolving
Yeah.
right now. So I've
Yeah.
got to say here, Denise, we've blown through this conversation. It feels like we just got started, and it's been an
I
absolutely
know.
delightful conversation. I've loved every second of it, and I know listeners are going to as
Thank
well.
you.
So thanks so much for taking some time and joining the program today.
Absolutely. Thank you for giving me a platform to talk about it. Appreciate that.
Now, for those interested in learning more about Denise and her work, you can do so via her website, goodfriendinc.org. You can also find her on the platforms such as LinkedIn and Instagram. And for reference, I will have links for all of these sites in the show notes. And I mean, hey, if you like today's show, please be sure to tell a friend and share. To show further support, you can always rate, review, and subscribe wherever you access your podcasts. And lastly, as I mentioned off the top, head on over to YouTube. I do have the channel which hosts a few highlights from these audio recordings. And if you do make it over there, I would love that like or subscribe. Now finally, don't forget to join us on the next episode of Life as a, where we'll continue to explore and unearth the details of professions and the people behind them. I'm your host, Christopher Schoenwald. Until next time, stay curious about life and living.